Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're talking about a kind of secret formula for innovation that's been hiding in plain sight for decades. This is an approach that literally turns creativity from this random, lucky spark into a repeatable science. So let's pull back the curtain on this thing called TRIZ.
Just think about that for a second. What if coming up with the next big thing wasn't about some random flash of genius? What if it was a science you could actually learn? A clear, logical blueprint you could follow? Well, that's the wild idea we're diving into today.
Okay, so our story kicks off way back in the mid-20th century. We're talking about the original blueprint here, the one that first turned invention into a real science, and that's classic TRIZ.
So yeah, TRIZ. It stands for the Theory of Inventive Problem Solving, which sounds kind of formal, but what it is, it's just incredible. It came from this absolutely massive project by a Soviet engineer named Genrich Altshuler. And get this, he literally sifted through over 200,000 patents. Can you imagine? He was hunting for universal patterns, and what he found was mind-blowing. Innovation wasn't random at all. It actually followed these predictable paths. You see, the whole point was to stop waiting around for that magical eureka moment to strike. Instead, you'd use a set of tools like the 40 inventive principles. For instance, one of them is segmentation. It's simple, right? If something's too big or complex, just break it down. Think about those giant telescope mirrors. They're not one solid piece. They're made of smaller hexagonal segments that fit together. It's brilliant. And this wasn't some academic exercise, you know. We're talking about giants like Samsung, Boeing, and General Electric using this stuff to solve their gnarliest problems.
Okay, so classic TRIZ was this incredibly powerful blueprint. But the world doesn't stand still, does it? The pace of everything started to accelerate like crazy, and pretty soon, you could start to see some cracks appearing in this old foundation.
And the first big problem? The time commitment. To get really good at classic TRIZ, you were looking at something like 120 hours of intense training. 120 hours. In the world we live in today, that's just a huge ask.
And it wasn't just the time, right? It was also just how complex it was. The main algorithm at its heart, this thing called ARIUS, was this winding, confusing path with over 80 steps. For engineers, it was basically like having to learn a whole new, really difficult language just to solve one problem. It was a lot. So what you ended up with was this brilliant, powerful system that was just too slow, too rigid for the modern world. It was perfect for those deep, old-school engineering problems, but it really struggled to keep up with the fast, cross-functional challenges that companies face every single day now.
But, the story doesn't just end there, with TRIZ becoming a museum piece. No way. The core ideas were way too valuable to just throw away. And that led to this new wave of innovation, not in products, but in the problem-solving method itself. It was time for TRIZ, the next generation.
The first big breakthrough was something called TRIZ 10. And it was genius because it basically applied the 80-20 rule to invention. Researchers looked at the data and found that, get this, just 10 of those 40 principles were being used to solve more than half of all the common technical problems. So by just focusing on those essential 10, the learning curve, well, it wasn't a curve anymore. It just got slashed.
And then other versions started popping up. You had TOP-TRIZ, which was all about making the process easier to grasp. It framed every problem as a simple interaction. A tool does something to an object to create a product. Super clear. And then there was OTSM-TRIZ, which took the whole thing and blew it wide open, expanding it beyond just engineering. Now you could use this framework to solve complex problems in any field you could think of, business, social policy, you name it.
And the evolution just kept going, branching out into these really cool specialized fields. There's Bio-TRIZ, which looks to nature for answers. Think about studying a spider's web to come up with a new kind of super strong adhesive. How cool is that? And then you have Eco-TRIZ, which points all of this inventive firepower at one of our biggest challenges, figuring out how to design things that are actually sustainable.
So when you look at all these new versions together, the picture gets really clear. That massive training time, it drops from a potential 120 hours all the way down to as little as 4. And that's really the big takeaway here, specialization. There's now a flavor of TRIZ for pretty much any need you have, whether you need speed, something user-friendly, or you're trying to solve problems way outside of engineering.
Okay, so this all sounds great on paper, right? But what does it actually look like in the real world? Does faster and simpler still pack a punch when it comes to results? Well, the answer is a huge, resounding yes.
The single biggest impact is just how accessible it's become. Look at this. The barrier to entry has gone from what was basically a months-long commitment to something you could learn in a weekend workshop.
Suddenly, systematic innovation wasn't just for this tiny elite group of specialists anymore.
And here's the kicker. Making it easier didn't make it weaker. Not at all. In fact, studies have shown that teams using these new, streamlined TRIZ methods are actually generating creative ideas more than 40% faster than with old-school brainstorming. So it's not just faster to learn, it's actually more effective. How about that?
Okay, let me give you a story that just perfectly captures the power of this whole evolution. You've got Boeing, right? And they're struggling for months with this persistent, critical overheating problem in some of their aircraft electronics. A super complex problem, and their engineers were just completely stumped.
So what do? They bring in a TOP-TRIZ expert, and in a single 4-hour session, just 4 hours, the method forces them to zero in on the core physical contradiction. And it was this. The electronics needed to be packed close together for performance, but they also needed to be far apart to stay cool. See? It's a direct conflict. Once the problem was framed that clearly, the team could finally focus on principles designed to solve that specific contradiction. And boom, they had a breakthrough. A problem that had them stuck for months was solved in a single afternoon. That right there is the power of a better system.
And this whole evolution, it is far from over. In fact, it's speeding up. The principles of systematic innovation are now starting to merge with the most powerful technologies of our era, and it's pointing toward a future that is incredibly exciting.
So what's the next big leap? You guessed it, it's integrating TRIZ with artificial intelligence. This is the moment where that systematic blueprint for invention gets its biggest, most powerful upgrade ever.
So, say hello to something called AutoTRIZ. These are these new AI systems that take the cold, hard logic of TRIZ and combine it with the incredible power of large language models. We're talking about AI that can scan massive databases, patents, scientific papers, technical docs, in seconds and automatically apply TRIZ principles to suggest solutions. The speed and accuracy are just off the charts.
So the road ahead is becoming pretty clear. Right now, today, we have these faster, more accessible TRIZ methods. In the very near future, AI is going to slash problem-solving time even more. And by the end of this decade, the prediction is that these tools won't just be for engineering. They're expected to be standard practice in over 20 different fields. Think medicine, management, the works.
And that leaves us with a really fascinating final thought, doesn't it? For decades, TRIZ was all about helping humans think more like a systematic inventive machine. But now we're building inventive machines that are learning to think more like humans. So as we start to automate the very process of creativity itself, you just have to wonder, is the next great inventor going to be a human or an algorithm?